Alright, hello, boys, girls, and Kerbals of all ages. Today, I am starting up a new series. Because Kerbal Showdown, I haven't gotten many people yet, and there doesn't seem to be much interest. I'm like, hey, why not try my hand at ground battles? That's probably just because no one's ever seen it, but yes, ground battles. So, works in a pretty similar way to the air battles, the 3 match types. So, standard. We'll have, duel between 2 vehicles, teams, which, could be the same types of vehicles, could be different. Of course, and then, of course, attack and defend. I also was thinking of some other ideas, but so far there haven't really been anything that's really popped in my head. So again, on to the rules. So, construction rules. Number 1, no unnecessary part cramming. That applies more to just, like fuel, ammunition. Don't just shove stuff in just to keep part counts high, because that's annoying. Design can be original or based on a historical vehicle, but must meet all the design constraints and be reasonable. Historical designs, of course, get right specific performance, which means, you can build outside of the constraints. Now, again, this is all within reason, but, you can build stuff that, is more to historical specification than actual specification, or at least what specifications would call for. It says aircraft. I need to change that. I pretty much copy and paste this, but. So for historical vehicles, again, any distinctive design features must be maintained to the best of one's ability. Again, I feel with ground vehicles, this won't be as big of a thing. With boats, it probably will be more so like the organization, the conning towers, if there's an antenna, that kind of stuff. And that's more just again, it's the counterbalance to historical things. So you can't take a lot of stuff. Again, armorines can't be changed unless specified. Now this we actually probably will have specification. Another thing I was thinking about doing is allowing for specific amounts of plates in certain areas. I'll get into that later. Kind of the ideas I was thinking for potential first couple rounds. Again, try to keep part counts as low as possible. No really elaborate aesthetics. I know with ground vehicles we will have more aesthetic, but again, try to be tasteful. Try to use the proper parts you can. Vehicles must be maintained by normal means. So again, steering a wheel for land vehicles, or if it's like tank drive. Be reasonable. With boats, again, rudders, and then if you're making like a jet ski or something, you could do something like that. Again, I think to even be able to turn it, you'll have to use the thrust vectoring on your engines or some sort. So that's not as big of a thing. It's more just I don't want a little jet car that can flip around, even though it would probably tip. I found that when trying out Jeeps. So on to the next rule, which is propulsion. I'm going to be a little more of a stickler on this, just because I think it's I kind of. Otherwise, people especially for land vehicles, it's alright, just shove a bunch of RTGs and it keeps weight down. But I think what I was going to do is make it where you have to use fuel. Now, granted, fuel cells don't consume a lot of fuel, so it's you'll get enough power. I was trying out some Jeeps earlier, and they could probably drive for hours on end on 2 little of those little gray fuel tanks, and it would use 2 fuel cells, so they'll last. They'll last, yeah. So RTGs are prohibited. Watercraft use, I would say, things befitting. Like if it's a nuclear-powered boat, again, you could use a nuclear reactor. If it's diesel, some of the motors too will have their own propulsive means, so it's just more go on that. This one I think I'm really kind of wanting to enforce is all crew must have accommodation in their respective crew positions. Now, here, I will kind of pull up something in a second, but what that means is you have to have crew, in a seat or in a cockpit or whatever, in the place where they would be functioning on a vehicle. So if you have the driver must sit in a position that is, where they'd be able to drive. You don't, shove them in the back of a tank looking, sideways. Kind of thing. Same with gunners and loaders, it would be all right, put them near the turret. Commanders, it's a little more variable. I would say put them in a position where they'd be able to command. Dang, yeah, wait, contains electromagnetic parts. Dang it. I thought this was gonna happen. Nonetheless, here, I'll show you kind of in my screenshots, I'll show you a picture. Yeah, lots of fun stuff. But again, so something else. Where is it? Yeah, here. So if you look at this one, this little picture, as you can see, Jeb this is actually the commander seat. The driver sits right here, and there's actually a camera right there. That's why I wouldn't lose, because the cameras got messed up. But then, like, later in back, they're like, the two little pods into the turret that are Jeb and Bill's spot. Val is the driver, Jeb is the commander, of course. So yeah, that's really that. So again, just do that. It's just kind of a fun, additional little design component. Rules will be the same, where they start is as much of a thing. Like, I'm thinking we'll start either kind of flat open area next to KSC. I won't even start them on that, because in practice I found they usually, like, if you put them on other sides of the runway, they don't see each other, and then they just kind of get lost and give up. So I'll either put them in open area, or we'll do kind of more rough terrain, which will be like the hills behind KSC. Maybe eventually we'll do like mountains, deserts, badlands, that kind of stuff. Also, there's always the option for amphibious and, of course, sea battles, both above and beneath the waves, if I can figure out how to get submarines to work. But yeah, all vehicles must, be AI controlled. I'm not going to be driving your stuff for you. If, like, something arises, something tips over because of a fluke or whatnot, like, I'll use Vessel Mover on it now. When they go up in the air, they do get shot at, so be mindful of that. You don't want your things tipping over, but yeah. So again, and they must, of course, go in the qualifying configuration. For example, like if we were to do like semi-trucks, I'd probably have it where they have to haul like you have to make a trailer, then have a haul, like, large orange fuel tank that's full. It's like, right, if you drive, the qualification says you have to have the fuel tank, you have to drive it with the fuel tank type thing. Unless, of course, I would say, like, all right, just make sure you make a truck that can do that. Actually, I'd probably do that. Make the truck where you could do that, and then just make it where you'd have like a machine gun or something on it. Vehicles, again, should be able to carry all necessary fuel, ammo. They can play with or without infinite fuel. In this case, I'm thinking definitely not infinite fuel. Ammo, I'm thinking probably not either, just given you generally can fight pretty well, because ground vehicles, they have lots of space on them. You also have to, again, have provisions for crew. So that was kind of like earlier, like in the design thing. So make sure you have adequate crew for the vehicle you're building. So we'll get into that later when I get to each vehicle have different design things. But yeah, if a vehicle is destroyed or loses its driver, it's considered dead. Now there will be cases where it's like, all right, when I was testing the Jeeps, it's like, all right, if the front part gets kind of shot off and the driver is dead and the machine gun is still functioning, we'll give them kind of a redemption factor. But if the other side either runs away or just succeeds in blowing up the other side, then it's of course death. Now if they both happen to, it's like, gunner is able to get kind of redemption, then it would be usually a tie, because usually gets to a point where they can't kill each other if it's both of them. In the event of a collision, again, surviving party, or that with the largest fraction of surviving crew is the winner. If there are no survivors or both survive, then it's a tie. Plain and simple. Matches consist of 1 round for initial and then 2 with a tiebreaker for champions. Drone wingmen are strictly prohibited. This rule is carrying over. I cannot stress that enough. No one wants drone wingmen. That stuff's weird. And each series will have a specific theme. With these themes will come certain design performance constraints. Design constraints are just rules that govern how the vehicles are going to be built. They include rules in size, crew requirements, restriction on what parts can be used, yada yada. Nothing too new. Performance constraints. Again, requirements that apply to performance. They include some properties such as minimum or maximum speed, terrain maneuverability, cargo capacity, and also special things such as is it amphibious? Mod load. So again, BD Army will be required. Tweak scale, I would say, would be required. Fuel switch, I would say strongly recommended, just because for fuel tanks, especially for ground vehicles, you're need to make sure you have both liquid fuel and oxidizer. And I found there are some cases where you may not be able to always get that in some tanks. So, stock tanks or mod tanks or whatever. So just get that. It's very useful. Just so you aren't like, oh, I wanted this fuel tank, but I can't have it. Procedural wings, Airplanes Plus I'd recommend just because it gives you lots of parts and whatnot. Procedural wings, optional because you really don't need it. I don't maybe like aesthetics or something like that. It does make decent fuel tanks. AOA, again, recommended just for the parts. B9 recommended because of the parts. Hanger extender strongly recommended, especially for naval, because you build anything smaller than, anything larger than like a Corvette, you're gonna need hanger extender. Kerbal Aircraft expansion, again, more parts. QuizTech recommended for parts. OBT parts, SXT parts, which again, like stock extension, very good stuff. Range extender optional if you just want to test stuff out. Vessel mover, again, optional for testing stuff out. I like that, just test the different abilities. Maritime pack and ship parts, recommended but definitely required once we're doing watercraft. Aviation cockpits, again, optional. Star Wars mod, I might eventually do it where we'll have like Star Wars battles. I haven't really gotten to that point yet. I would probably do it more so with the with Kerbal Showdown, just because you could have like X-wings be TIE fighters on the ground. It would kind of be hard to do because you can't really make a functioning AT-AT that would drive, unless you were like almost put up on wheels, and then no one likes that. That's weird. So yeah, that'll be our first series. So that'll be in the next video. Remember, have a nice day. Keep the pointy side forward.